Tonight on 24, Trump says Iran isn't capable of getting its act together, and it's better if they come to their senses sooner rather than later. The U.S. president, emphasizing continued pressure on the Islamic Republic, says a naval blockade is more effective than bombing.
President Trump, unlike other presidents, has had the courage to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon.
A dispute between the U.S. Secretary of War and Democratic members of Congress about the necessity of war with Iran. The Pentagon says this military operation has cost $25 billion so far. And the return of Mehdi Taj and his companions to Iran after Canadian police prevented their entry into the country. The Iranian Football Federation says they were sent back due to the host's inappropriate behavior.
From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Good evening to Iran International viewers in Iran and globally. Starting the program, let's go straight to the White House, where Donald Trump is addressing the media.
That we have a great military, a great navy, and now they have to publicly and officially say that they've surrendered. They have to say that we surrender. And their economy is really in trouble. Their economy is dead. Do you think that economic anger and a naval blockade will bring Iran to where you want it to be? Well, we are actively talking to them, but well, we honestly just don't want to get on an exhausting 18-hour flight simply to go over there and look at a single piece of paper. Now we're talking to them on the phone instead, and it's much better. Either their team calls us or my people reach out and call them. This way, we'll see the final answer much sooner without wasting days on travel. Of course, I personally prefer face-to-face interactions because you can read the room and it's generally better. But well, if you want to fly 18 hours every single time for a brief meeting, and you already know exactly what will come out of that meeting, you know they just want to hand you a simple piece of paper. It's really ridiculous. Before you go, they've written papers, and well, they've come a long way. But the question is whether they will reach where we want them to or not, and we won't reach any agreement unless they accept that they won't have nuclear weapons.
Are we considering relocating NASA's headquarters out of D.C.? States like Florida, Texas, and Ohio have expressed interest.
You're going to have to say it differently.
ببخشید دوباره سوالتون تکرار کنید. آیا مقر ناسا رو از واشنگتن دی سی منتقل می‌کنید به ایالت‌های مثل تگزاس یا اوهایو؟ ببینید بهترین کسی که میتونه به این سوال جواب بده همین آقاست. آیا شما حاضرید که این مقر زیباتون رو ترک کنید؟ پاسخ اینجاست که ما 10 مرکز عالی داریم در گوش و کنار جهان که کمک می‌کنن.
We have 10 excellent centers around the world helping with NASA's missions. But regarding our main headquarters, many people are interested in us, so being in Washington, D.C. allows us to make better decisions. Washington, D.C., I truly think would be a highly suitable and strategic place for NASA's central headquarters. Probably the most important thing to remember is that Washington, D.C. is now one of the safest cities in the whole country. When I arrived a little over a year ago, it was a very unsafe city, but it has completely improved. And now, perhaps more important than ever, we proudly have the most attractive country in the world. And you are also helping to make our great country remarkably attractive for everyone today. A year and a half ago, I repeated this specific story many times. The Saudi king and several other prominent leaders also told me directly, saying the Saudi king said, Mr. President, a year and a half ago, even just a year ago, we honestly thought your country was completely dead. We thought the United States was a dead country, fading away rapidly. And now you are the most attractive, vibrant country anywhere in the world. And it is absolutely true. Believe it or not, everyone in the entire world who is carefully watching that incredible NASA operation, this historic mission of incredible astronauts standing right behind me, I truly do not know where they get this immense courage, but you are also an essential, important part.
We're the most attractive country.
Thanks.
Well, you are hearing parts of the U.S. president's remarks to the press. In this very meeting that Mr. Trump had, he said the Islamic Republic has been militarily defeated because, according to him, there's nothing left for the Iranian government. Mr. Trump said that even if Iran has moved a few missiles during the ceasefire, according to him, the United States can destroy them within 15 minutes. Meanwhile, with the continuation of the naval blockade of Iran, he said the Islamic Republic is not capable of managing the situation and getting things in order, and doesn't know how to sign a non-nuclear agreement. Donald Trump, in this message published on his Truth Social, with an armed picture of himself, wrote that Iran better get wise sooner rather than later. Simultaneously, the Pakistani Prime Minister's office also said that Shehbaz Sharif, in a meeting of the country's cabinet, stated that Islamabad's efforts to establish a ceasefire and peace in the Middle East are still ongoing. Our correspondent Samira Garai has joined us from the White House. Samira, from Mr. Trump's statements, both in recent days and in this press conference, it's clear that the Islamic Republic's three-stage plan doesn't seem to attract much attention for him. The nuclear issue, Iran's nuclear program, still appears to be the main point of contention between Washington and Tehran.
That's right. Actually, fundamentally, the war also started because of these nuclear issues, Fardad. Mr. Trump, ever since Sunday, when the news about the Islamic Republic's proposals came out, it seems he has given his negative opinion. On Monday, too, when there was a National Security Council meeting, he announced his opposition to the proposals in that meeting. On Monday, news came that people from the Islamic Republic went to bring new proposals, and then informed sources are reporting this today in the Wall Street Journal. According to informed sources, regarding the process of finding and relaying messages back and forth from Mojtaba Khamenei, officials within the Islamic Republic have stated, "I need a few days." The involved parties are currently waiting for that time to pass. They expect the Islamic Republic to want to send messages to Pakistan. You also mentioned that the Pakistani side is still trying to advance negotiations and continue mediations. But Mr. Trump, right now, while hosting astronauts who had traveled to the moon with Artemis II, said a very clear sentence. He just said that we haven't had an agreement so far. There has been no agreement. And until the nuclear issue moves forward, and they promise that they are not pursuing nuclear weapons, there will be no agreement. This is no different from what Mr. Trump has said throughout all these months, ever since his second presidential term began, or even the first term since 2018 when he withdrew from the JCPOA. Mr. Trump considers even 0.5% enrichment as a basis for you being able to move towards nuclear weapons. When he says don't have nuclear weapons, it means you shouldn't enrich. And this is a very clear demand that Mr. Trump will not back down from. But right now, where we stand, there's no war, there's no talk of negotiations, nor is our outlook one that wants to move towards an agreement or even an understanding. This is a situation that, recent days, was being talked about in the media as a frozen conflict, a cold tension, something like a Cold War. Now, today, Axios is reporting that CENTCOM has prepared a series of very heavy and rapid attacks, meaning they would be both lightning fast and quickly over, and also very heavy. So if this volatile situation is going to continue and there isn't a meaningful change, Mr. Trump will likely go in that direction, leaning towards short, lightning-fast military attacks. And, oh, by the way, targeting critical energy infrastructure, according to what Axios says, is also firmly on Mr. Trump's strategic agenda. Through that aggressive pressure, he believes he can finally bring the Islamic Republic back to the negotiating table, so he can fully resolve the complex nuclear issue. And alongside these ongoing geopolitical developments, the stringent economic blockade will undoubtedly continue. This blockade is a critical measure that was formally discussed and agreed upon during a recent meeting of the U.S. National Security Council, where members reached a firm consensus on its enforcement. Furthermore, we have heard explicit statements from Mr. Trump regarding this precise issue. During these diplomatic talks, Mr. Trump has strategically utilized the blockade to maintain a powerful upper hand, gaining maximum leverage in negotiations. He signals a clear intent to make these restrictions even heavier in the near future. Conversely, from the perspective of the Islamic Republic, the reaction is predictably severe. We know that Iranian officials are profoundly angry about this tightening squeeze. They have openly threatened to militarily attack U.S. naval forces in the region if this suffocating situation continues. Meanwhile, to cope with the lack of buyers, they are making desperate efforts to store the unrefined oil they are still pumping. They are putting it into temporary waste storage storage in regions like Asalaweya and Ahwaz. Moreover, credible reports suggest they are clandestinely sending this sanctioned oil overland to China by freight train. Despite hearing about ongoing efforts, Trump will not end the naval blockade. Instead, he wants to ramp up pressure through short, lightning-fast attacks. Today, he posted a social media photo of himself armed with explosions behind him, writing, "I'm not a nice guy anymore. Those days are over." He warned the Islamic Republic to come to their senses about non-nuclear agreements. To break this current deadlock, Trump appears ready for short-term military actions.
Thank you. Samira Garai from the White House joins us. Ruhullah Rahimpour, journalist and political analyst, has joined us. Mr. Rahimpour, the signals we're hearing now, it seems Mr. Trump has prepared himself for a longer game, with more focus on the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. How much do you think it can, get a response? And this is something that can either bring the Islamic Republic to the negotiating table or cause serious internal disruptions internally.
Greetings to you, Mr. Farzad, and also to the esteemed viewers. Trump tried during this period, in recent days, to prevent the Islamic Republic from turning the Strait of Hormuz into a trump card. I believe that by rejecting the request, by rejecting the recent proposal of the Islamic Republic, that same 2- or 3-stage plan, this practically haven't. Not only did the strategic Strait of Hormuz fail to become a definitive trump card for Tehran, but a comprehensive naval blockade was actively deployed as a powerful countermeasure against it. This decisive move can practically shift the entire geopolitical equation to the distinct detriment of the Islamic Republic. In fact, it effectively neutralizes the Islamic Republic's long-standing tactic of using the Strait of Hormuz to escape mounting international pressure over the contentious nuclear issue. Ultimately, these evolving conditions can significantly raise America's hand, both in the military field and in diplomacy, provided that Trump's primary goal is to use the naval blockade to bring the Islamic Republic to its knees and force a complete surrender. If such a strategic pressure campaign were to actually succeed, the Islamic Republic will naturally find itself standing at a highly critical geopolitical crossroads. Faced with this reality, the regime is left with 2 stark options. It could be forced, under the suffocating weight of this very naval blockade, to give into comprehensive negotiations where its nuclear program is directly targeted, even without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Alternatively, to free itself from this increasingly dire situation, it might take military action in a short-term plan. It would attempt to resolve the naval blockade through a preemptive strike or sudden military escalation. This scenario could ultimately represent a very high and multifaceted risk for the Islamic Republic. How it unfolds heavily depends on exactly which cost-benefit analysis the internal logic within the Islamic Republic's complex governing system chooses to perform. A comprehensive economic blockade will severely tighten the already fragile domestic situation, fundamentally change established governance patterns, and create immense additional societal pressure. According to some political analysts, this relentless financial strangulation might even be vastly more devastating than a classic conventional military war. Donald Trump's primary hope is that this intense, agonizing process will in fact eventually force the Islamic Republic's reluctant consent, culminating in a highly restrictive agreement specifically targeting its advancing nuclear program.
Many observers have interpreted Abbas Araki's recent diplomatic trip to St. Petersburg, Russia, as a sign that Iran is perhaps willing to hand over its enriched uranium to Russia if a new agreement is reached. Yet just a few minutes ago, when reporters asked Mr. Trump about this, he deflected, stating that if Mr. Putin wants to help the world, he should focus on bringing about a ceasefire in Ukraine. How much do you think that proposed uranium solution now seems to be completely off the table, given Mr. Trump's dismissive reaction?
In several stages, Americans, especially Donald Trump himself, have fundamentally opposed the transfer of the Islamic Republic's enriched uranium to Russia, and naturally, he considers this to be in Russia's broader interest vis-a-vis America, and he will not do this because it conflicts with America's national interests in the international system, and in the arena of confrontation with Russia and China, it could be problematic. Americans will certainly not accept this. Furthermore, the Islamic Republic's negotiating party, the other ultimate deciding factor, is America. So if a comprehensive agreement for the safe removal of enriched uranium is to take shape, the explicit consent of both primary parties must occur. It is simply not possible for the Islamic Republic to have such an intention to export these materials, but for the Americans not to consent and provide guarantees. At the same time, Russia consistently tries to use its diplomatic cards logically and carefully in this complex geopolitical situation, just as it has cleverly managed to gain significant concessions regarding its crucial oil sales exemption right amidst the Islamic Republic's crippling economic sanctions and ongoing naval blockade, Moscow aims to leverage these tense multilateral negotiations to secure its long-term strategic and vital national economic interests. The specific point Trump is raising regarding Ukraine is highly strategic because he is, in fact, sending a clear diplomatic message. If you are looking for concessions here on the complex Iran issue, you must be prepared to give reciprocal concessions on the Ukraine issue in return. This transactional approach could actually make the ongoing confrontation between the US and the Islamic Republic somewhat more transnational. Ultimately, this means it could turn a bilateral dispute into a broader, deeply interconnected international issue too.
Thank you. Mohammed Bagher Bop says the enemy is seeking to weaken Iran from within through a naval blockade and sowing discord, and wants to activate economic pressure and internal discord through a naval blockade and media fabrications to make us weak or even collapse from within. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, stated that before the start of the Islamic Republic's naval blockade, an average of 5 ships docked or were anchored daily at Chabahar port. According to CENTCOM, currently, with the imposition of the blockade and the halt of Iran's incoming and outgoing trade, over 20 vessels still remain in Chabahar. Meanwhile, Press TV, quoting a senior security source, reported that the Islamic Republic has threatened to take unprecedented military action if the U.S. continues to seize Iran-linked ships. At the same time, while the possibility of resuming war against the Islamic Republic still exists, some institutions, including the Modern War Institute, affiliated with the U.S. Military Academy, say the United States, by strengthening its ground forces, has more than ever the capability to conduct a ground attack on Iran, and using this capability, it carried out its longest artillery strike in the previous round of conflict. The Institute's analysis notes the U.S. Army extensively uses ground-based radars to quickly detect and counter the Islamic Republic's air attacks. Furthermore, U.S. ground forces have also assisted in carrying out attacks on naval targets. Farzin Nadimi, a senior research fellow for defense and security affairs at the Washington Institute, is with us from this city. Mr. Nadimi, in your opinion, will this continued naval blockade of Iran prevent a new war or accelerate it?
Not necessarily. The naval blockade was a strategic phase that was added at the very end of the war to the United States Army's operations against Iran. In my opinion, it is undeniably a completely warlike action. It serves as a direct complement to the nearly 39-day military action conducted by the U.S. Army, and it still seems like it is going to continue for the foreseeable future. On the other hand, it is also very effective. In my opinion, it has been a very, very smart tactical move to effectively counter their regional maritime influence. A kind of blockade or siege that the Islamic government had implemented in the Strait of Hormuz, and it violated the international status of the Strait of Hormuz, and tried to declare its sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. But it seems that the type of reaction the Islamic government is going to show to this action will be in two forms. There's a kind of disagreement among Islamic government officials. On one hand, they strategically interpret this naval blockade as a direct continuation of existing sanctions and that ongoing economic war, deliberately refraining from direct military action against it. They patiently try to let the situation continue until the opposing forces themselves get tired. And on the other hand, they actively find other strategic ways to neutralize this naval blockade. For example, they effectively bypass it by using Pakistan's coastal waters, establishing secure land routes, and navigating the Caspian Sea and maritime waters with Russia. Furthermore, they sustained valuable exports and imports via extensive railway networks and by utilizing cross-border road transit. These are the strategic methods they will probably try to consider as a viable alternative to direct military confrontation and kinetic engagement with the United States, to somehow avoid sparking a devastating and costly renewed war. But on the other hand, there are also highly vocal individuals, including even more extreme hardliners, deeply entrenched within the Revolutionary Guard, who are aggressively pushing for us to definitively assert our national sovereignty and project regional strength as soon as practically possible. This aggressive naval blockade is severely severely damaging our international reputation and openly jeopardizing our so-called territorial integrity today. As a direct result, we must inevitably engage in a decisive military confrontation with the opposing fleet and actively try to change this dire situation, even if it leads to a dangerous new phase of war. I think this intense struggle currently exists between the two competing groups, and in the coming days, I firmly think one side will definitively succeed in fully implementing its chosen path. Either we will witness a direct military engagement, meaning significant military actions will take place in the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz to try and forcefully break this naval blockade. This sudden move would undoubtedly incur severe human and military costs for the United States, and certainly this volatile escalation could very quickly lead to a broader regional military conflict. Or no, alternatively, they might try to somehow continue this very precarious situation and, for example, manage to advance their heavily reliant oil-based economy in some alternative way despite the ongoing restrictions. But, well, there are massive logistical issues here, specifically regarding the fundamental issue of oil production and severely limited oil storage capacity. As we're seeing right now, they're already facing unprecedented problems with finding adequate facilities for securely storing their massive surplus reduction. They can now try to take specific actions like significantly increasing the overall level of imports while carefully managing the domestic consumption of refined gasoline products. Additionally, they can try to, through reinstating vital oil swap lines with Russia, be able to efficiently export oil to Russian markets. They might realistically be able to pursue these alternative avenues in the medium and long term, but in the short term, well, these severe existing problems could actually serve as powerful political ammunition for those factions within the Revolutionary Guard who are actively looking to break this crippling economic blockade as soon as possible and fundamentally change the current situation on the ground. I think we will ultimately enter a new phase of military conflict soon.
Thank you, Farzin Nadimi, Senior Defense and Security Fellow at the Washington Institute. Hours ago, the U.S. Secretary of War stated in a meeting with the House Armed Services Committee that Washington remains determined to prevent the Islamic Republic from acquiring nuclear weapons. Pete Hegseth, when asked about when the war with Iran might end, said the U.S. military never ever shows its hand to the enemy about how long it's going to stay committed to a mission. At this meeting, the Pentagon's financial watchdog, responding to a representative's question, also said that, so far, this military operation has cost around $25 billion.
Speaking of war fighting, the topic of Iran.
Speaking of war, the topic of Iran, I'm sure, will come up today, and I, for one, really welcome talking about Iran. I'm really eager to talk to you about their army's incredible successes, which, have been achieved in just a few weeks. President Trump, unlike other presidents, had the courage, to make sure Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons. His resolve is ironclad. And in this regard, we also have the best negotiating force in the world. The biggest challenge, the absolute biggest enemy we're facing right now is like the reckless words and rhetoric deeply tainted with defeat and lies coming from the Democrats in Congress. Look, I'm reminding you, it's been 2 months, just 2 short months we've been in this war. Do we really need to remind you exactly how many years we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan or in Vietnam? We've only been in this war for like 2 months, fighting a crucial war to successfully counter a severe existential threat so Iran doesn't ever get their hands on nuclear weapons. I'm incredibly proud, to have been part of this historic operation under President Trump's strong leadership.
About what our troops have accomplished.
Marzieh Hosseini, our correspondent from Congress, has joined us. Marzieh, maybe, as expected, the U.S. Secretary of War's remarks in Congress, they really led to a lot of arguments and even tension in many cases.
Mr. Hegseth tried hard over the past 2 months to avoid coming to Congress and sitting in the hot seat opposite the Democrats, but in the end, he simply had to. There were 2 specific reasons, One was the timing of this war, which actually tomorrow could sort of be seen as the last legal day of this war. And the second was the budget for this war. This session was held in the U.S. Congress's Budget Committee, where Mr. Haig was there to, defend Trump's $1.5 trillion request for the Department of War, or the Pentagon. As he himself said, he knew the Iran issue was a big deal in this session. And, well, that's exactly what happened. Democrats used a large part of the session to, really go after Mr. Hegseth. Right at the very beginning, when Hegseth was walking into the meeting room, some anti-war Americans who were there, they confronted Mr. Hegseth, shouting at him because of a war that, according to them, is both illegal and, has cost the U.S. a ton of money. Throughout the session, arguments in different parts were about both the Pentagon's overall performance responsibility and, the war itself. Specifically about the war, part of what came up was when Mr. Hegseth, when they asked him why they attacked Iran, he used Iran's nuclear program as an excuse. Actually, Democrats brought up Mr. Hegseth's previous statements from 2025, meaning that in earlier attacks, Iran's nuclear program had supposedly been destroyed. They said, specifically, the atmosphere was super tense. Everyone was really putting Mr. Hegseth under pressure, bringing up claims he had contradicted, and trying to politically leverage the high costs of this war. But the most important news point this war had regarding this session was about the war's cost. We know that over the past few weeks, the White House has strongly refused to say how much has been spent on this war. But ultimately, they were forced to mention the figure of $25 billion in this session. Many in the press and Democrats are again accusing them of lying. They're saying specifically, you had stated that in the first week of this war, it cost over $10 billion. So how is it that after all this time, the cost is only $25 billion? We know that the US Congress's estimate, the Democrats' estimate, is way higher than all these figures. This was the issue that was supposed to convince US Democratic lawmakers in today's session to approve this budget. Although it currently seems that no major breakthrough has occurred on this particular matter so far, the situation will likely become much clearer within the next few days.
Thank you, congressional correspondent Marzia Hosseini. Shaheen Samii, a national security expert from Virginia, is with us. Mr. Samii, a lot is being said about, the end of the U.S. president's 60-day legal deadline to continue the war with Iran. But in contemporary history, we've seen presidents try to bypass this period in various legal ways, buying more time either by requesting an extension or with other legal pretexts. Do you think that Mr. Trump, if he wants to, resume the war with Iran, will he have a serious problem with Congress or not?
With the utmost respect to you, dear Farzad, as well as the incredibly resilient and brave people of Iran, I for one highly doubt that he will encounter any significant problems regarding this matter. There are several clear and historically backed reasons for this perspective. Just as you accurately mentioned in your previous points, past US presidents have easily and frequently bypassed that strict 2-month period that the War Powers Act traditionally mandates or compels them to follow. That is largely because they have consistently prioritized and considered various urgent issues, especially those concerning pressing national security requirements and immediate defense strategies. In many instances, they even formally wrote a letter to Congress explicitly stating, we need at least 30 more days to complete our strategic objectives. Even right now, we can see that Mr. Trump, with this very specific ceasefire period that he recently introduced, has actually completely postponed that impline. Also, we have another critical legal authorization here in the US called the Authorization for Use of Military Force, which, as you know, originally came into existence in the aftermath of 2001. However, this legislation specifically compels our presidents to clearly speak in terms of a strictly defined specific hostility, while also requiring them to consistently articulate a very clear and strategic plan. However, considering Republicans currently control both houses of the US Congress, and Trump has firm control over the party, he won't face any problems, especially since these congressional authorizations do not require a 2/3 majority. They only need a simple majority vote, which Republicans can easily secure. The congressional authorization doesn't need a 2/3 vote, and it only needs a simple majority vote, and Republicans can easily get that too. $25 billion in financial costs, plus many other political costs that Mr. Trump has incurred for this war so far. How tolerable do you think that is for the government, especially as we're approaching the midterm elections? Even now, the pressure on him is high. How much do you think a topic that seemed marginal just a few months ago might turn into an Achilles heel, even for his own party? It might become highly problematic, and we have absolutely no doubt about that reality, because right now, even the most staunch Republicans who have strongly supported Mr. Trump and his political agenda are starting to voice significant concerns on the sidelines. They are quietly saying that we desperately need more comprehensive discussions before taking further action. So, in fact, these allied lawmakers want to convince Mr. Trump to, well, either formally send a detailed written request for that specific authorization to use military force, or to officially seek congressional authorization for continuing the ongoing war. I mean, in a very real way, these Republicans also fundamentally need Mr. Trump to help them out politically by following established protocols, providing a clear framework to defend his executive decisions. And that's why I think, on one hand, Mr. Trump is using the issue of the naval blockade to put so much economic pressure on the Islamic Republic, and also to influence public opinion, both in America and in Iran, to the point where the officials of the Islamic Republic themselves don't exactly know where their decision-making capabilities lie. The very fact that Mr. Trump announced yesterday that they told us we are collapsing has also raised the question among many Republicans whether Trump is really trying to create disunity or if there's truly something behind the scenes that we're not aware of.
Thank you, Shaheen Sami, national security expert from Virginia.
The president of the European Commission, emphasizing the continuation of the ceasefire in the Middle East, has stated that any agreement with the Islamic Republic must also include Iran's nuclear and missile programs. However, according to Ursula von der Leyen, the return of peace and stability to the region must be pursued through diplomatic channels. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, reacting to Donald Trump's verbal attack and referring to the negative impacts of the war on the European economy, says he insists on his previous criticisms regarding the course of this war. This comes as Berlin has announced the deployment of a mine hunter to the Mediterranean for a potential mission in the Strait of Hormuz.
My colleague Ali Hassanpour from Berlin is with us. Ali, it seems that the demands of America and Europe are almost the same regarding Iran's nuclear program, but the disagreements remain very prominent and serious.
Exactly. Well, Farhad, currently, what's being seen from the developments of this war in Europe shows that this crisis has simultaneously affected several areas, from foreign policy and international relations, well, to the energy market and the domestic economies of European countries. However, at the political level, tensions between Germany and the United States have specifically increased. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz once again criticizes the United States' approach in this war and states that these conflicts have had a direct impact on Germany's energy supply and economic capacity, emphasizing that this war must be resolved. He argues that these ongoing global conflicts have had a severe direct impact on Germany's national energy supply and broader economic capacity, stressing with urgency that this devastating war must be resolved. But while in sharp contrast, we see that US President Donald Trump frequently verbally attacks him, publicly claiming that Merz simply lacks a proper nuanced understanding of the complex issue. Nevertheless, seeking to maintain diplomatic stability, the German Chancellor officially announced today that despite these clear ideological differences, this ongoing dispute will not strain Germany's foundational relations with the United States. But while alongside navigating these high-profile political differences, Germany is also proactively preparing for concrete practical actions to safeguard its domestic interests. The country's Ministry of Defense has now officially announced that the specialized mine hunter Fulda has strategically deployed to the Mediterranean Sea. This move serves as a crucial preliminary positioning for a potential mission in the highly volatile Strait of Hormuz, ensuring the vessel is in fact physically closer to the region. Well, we know this action is being taken while Germany has repeatedly stated that it can only participate in a broader international maritime mission if strict conditions are fully met. These prerequisites include, well, the definitive end of ongoing regional conflicts and receiving the required legal authorization directly from the country's national parliament. However, it seems that economic pressures have now led Germany to make its decision to get involved in this matter. But in the economic sphere, too, the consequences of this war are rapidly expanding. According to the European Union's announcement, the cost of fossil fuel imports for the Union has increased by over 27 billion euros in just a short period, without, well, the EU receiving more energy. In Germany, too, the effects of this crisis are directly visible. The German Federal Statistical Office announced today that the inflation rate in April reached 2.9%, which, well, shows a significant increase compared to last month. But another issue is, in fact, the concerns of Europeans. If we want to refer to this, we can in fact point to two main axes. First, the continuation, the current situation, especially regarding the security of vital routes like the Strait of Hormuz and its direct economic consequences, and the second axis is the possibility of the United States reaching an agreement with the Islamic Republic. European countries are concerned about what topics this agreement will cover and what exactly Washington's priority will be. Specifically, there are concerns that, well, Trump might declare the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz as a victory and leave the region with the current crisis. Meanwhile, well, the conversation that von der Leyen referred to, where she said that the nuclear issue and also ballistic missiles should be included in it.
Thanks to my Berlin colleague Ali Hassanpour. An informed official in the Canadian government told Iran International that Mehdi Taj, the head of Iran's football federation, was sent back from Canada just a few hours after arriving in the country. Iran's football federation confirmed the news, stating that their representatives returned to Iran due to the host's inappropriate behavior. According to reports, although these individuals had previously received permission to enter the country, they were extensively interrogated by Canadian authorities upon arrival. Ultimately, despite holding valid entry permissions, the Iranian football representatives were quickly deported back to Iran. It was previously announced that Mehdi Taj could not obtain a Canadian entry visa due to his past involvement with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which Canada designates as a terrorist organization.
Mehdi Taj and Hidayatullah Mebin, along with two other individuals representing the Islamic Republic of Iran's Football Federation, traveled to Canada to attend the 76th FIFA Congress in Vancouver. However, it appears they ultimately failed to gain entry into the country. According to exclusive information obtained by Iran International, border officials denied them access, and the delegation was promptly sent back from Canada to Iran late last night. However, according to an exclusive response provided by Canada's Ministry of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship to Iran International, officials stated that while Canada is very happy to be able to host the upcoming FIFA World Cup in 2026, strict protocols remain. All travel visas will be carefully evaluated and issued for each individual applicant, based specifically on their personal background. Furthermore, for those who were ever members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, it is simply not possible for them to ultimately gain entry into Canada. Under strict new sanctions imposed by the federal government of Canada, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has been officially placed on Canada's designated list of terrorist groups since June 2024. Consequently, this stringent measure explicitly prohibits any individuals affiliated with the IRGC from entering Canadian territory. Despite this ban, exclusive information that Iran International had previously obtained revealed a surprising development. It showed that Mehdi Taj, along with his accompanying group, had quietly started their journey on Saturday, crossed a land border, and traveled from Istanbul towards Canada so they could ultimately participate in this conference. But the specific visa they held, based on what has been officially clarified for us so far, was a type of temporary visa that somehow circumvented the existing IRGC sanctions. However, ultimately, based on significant political pressures that came directly from the Iranian Canadian community to officials in Ottawa, and were probably conveyed from Ottawa to the Immigration and Refugee Board and Canada Border Services, these particular individuals were ultimately not allowed to enter Canada. Masa Mortazavi, reporting from Toronto.
In a historic move, the International Football Federation approved that Afghan women footballers can henceforth represent their country in international competitions. FIFA, by changing its regulations, has allowed Afghan women players in exile to participate in the official competitions of this body. This decision was made after the Afghan women's national football team was banned from official competitions following the Taliban's return to power.
این یک گام قدرتمند و کم سابقه در ورزش جهانه. فیفا به این ابتکار تاریخی افتخار میکنه و چه در داخل زمین و چه بیرون از اون در کنار این بازیکنان شجاع خواهد ایستاد.
My colleague Razia Danish has joined us from our other studio in Washington. Razia, what fundamentally happened that FIFA decided for the first time to allow a team in exile to officially represent its country?
Farhad, yes, the return of Afghan women players to the pitch is really very happy news for women inside and outside Afghanistan. This isn't the first time FIFA has taken steps to help Afghan women. After the fall of the Islamic Republic, it helped about 160 women human rights activists and officials associated with women's sports in Afghanistan to leave the country. They mostly went to Australia and Europe. Over the past 5 years, human rights activists in Afghan sports, led by Khalida Popal, have worked tirelessly to urge the International Football Federation, FIFA, and the Asian Football Confederation to unite. Their goal is to allow Afghan women to return to the playing fields and reclaim their right to play football.
هم بدن و اجازه بدن زنان افغانستان دوباره به زمین‌های بازی برگردن و از حق بازی کردن فوتبال خودشون محروم نشن.
Currently, we see 80 talented Afghan women football players living across the Middle East, in America, throughout Europe, and in Australia. They are all scattered. Yet, they now come together proudly under one shared banner, and that's the flag of Afghanistan. Even without having official representation inside their home country, these resilient athletes are bravely raising Afghanistan's flag in various international arenas. Furthermore, the FIFA Council has officially stated that it will allow these inspiring women to participate in international games with the Afghan flag from now on.
The team will be a symbol of resilience.
این تیم نماد مقاومت خواهد بود. میدانم که کار سختی است چون زنان در داخل افغانستان برای حضور در آن با مشکلات زیادی روبرو خواهند بود. اما اگر بتوانیم صدای آنها باشیم، پیام امید را منتقل کنیم و حمایت خود را نشان دهیم، به زنان افغانستان خواهیم گفت که فراموش نشده اید. ما از این پلتفرم استفاده خواهیم کرد.
Razia, is there any clear indication that this specific model could potentially be adapted and used for other countries as well?
Fardad, Khalid Popal's remarks clearly tell us that this team that has been created isn't just for playing a game. Rather, they deeply want to take the suppressed voice of deprived Afghan women who have tragically been denied fundamental rights to education, work, and sports within their own country to major international arenas. They intend to bravely raise this voice on the green field. Now, as for whether we can extend this unique exception to other nations, the FIFA president explicitly says this is a strictly exceptional case. This is an exceptional situation in these emergency circumstances where a government has deprived the women of a country from playing and has officially dissolved the Afghanistan Women's Football Federation. We're joining hands, and with the help of the Asian Football Confederation, we're allowing these women to come and play under the flag of Afghanistan. This is the first time this is happening in FIFA's history, and, well, in the entire history of football worldwide. However, FIFA has officially stated that it is willing to consider the possibility for certain players living in exile, specifically athletes who, due to severe political unrest and ongoing security threats, are unable to play football within their own countries, to proudly step onto the green field representing the flag of their native nation. At the same time, FIFA strongly emphasizes that this unique accession requires specific emergency conditions to be met. A primary example is the oppressive Taliban government, which completely prohibits women from participating in sports. Ultimately, the governing body believes it is absolutely vital that displaced women residing in other countries are still able to access that traditional athletic platform and maintain the recognized national team structure that Afghan women once proudly possessed. But the FIFA president says all the effort we're making is to bring the rules from paper onto the field. And this itself shows that the voice of Afghan women is being heard. And these past few days have really created a very happy atmosphere for Afghan women, especially athletes in exile around the world.
Thank you very much, Razia Danish, my colleague in Washington. Before the end of today's program, we have a brief opportunity to take you to North London's Golders Green neighborhood, where a 45-year-old assailant violently attacked 2 Jewish residents. Alarmingly, this disturbing incident follows a string of multiple targeted attacks that have occurred over recent weeks and days across various parts of London against Jewish community centers. In one notable instance, an attack was also directed against the central building of Iran International in the UK, located in London. The live images you are currently seeing on your screens are being broadcast directly from Golders Green, focusing on the specific alleyway in this northern London area where the altercation unfolded. Photos of those tragically killed in the recent January protests in Iran, displayed alongside Israeli casualties from the October 7, 2023 attacks, had recently been published. It was around this sensitive time that the 45-year-old assailant violently attacked two Jewish individuals, aged 76 and 34. Fortunately, both victims are said to be recovering in stable condition. Currently, local police are conducting further thorough investigations to determine the assailant's exact motive, potential affiliation with any extremist group, and their background and nationality. If you'll allow, we'll conclude the program with these images. You can also watch Program 24 again a little later on Iran International's YouTube channel.